My Jesuit is Ignacio Ellacuria. Ellacuria was born in Portugal, Spain in 1930. After a Jesuit high school education, at 17 he decided to join the Jesuits and entered the novitiate at Loyola. He was sent to El Salvador to continue his studies. During his time at the seminary in Santa Tecla, El Salvador, he was called the Sun King for his compelling and demanding presence among his peers. After his time at Santa Tecla, Ellacuria studied classical language, humanities, and philosophy at Quito, Ecuador, from 1949 to 1955. He studied under Father Aurelio Espinosa Polit. Ellacuria returned to El Salvador in 1955 for 3 years to teach philosophy in the seminary of San Jose de la Montaña before going to Europe. After the 3 years, Ellacuria studied theology in Innsbruck, Austria from 1958 to 1962 under the well-known Jesuit theologian Karl Rahner, S.J. Ellacuria could have received a doctorate in theology had he written a final dissertation. Fun fact, while in Austria, Ellacuria was a member of the soccer team. Then on July 26, 1961, he was ordained a priest. After Austria, Ellacuria traveled to Spain. There he received his doctoral studies in philosophy at the Universidad Complutense in Spain in 1967. He studied under Spanish philosopher Xavier Zubiri. Zubiri helped contribute to Ellacuria's belief of liberation philosophy. Ellacuria believed that we must liberate the oppressed in order to reach the fullness of humanity. He is also one of the principal contributors to Latin American liberation theology. He desired to reflect about faith from the historical present, to reflect about the historical present from faith. According to him, all theology is conditioned by its historical present. Ellacuria returned to El Salvador in 1967 to begin as a professor of theology and philosophy at the University of Central America. He founded the Centro de Reflexión Teológica in 1974 at the university and became director of the university's Cultural Extension Review magazine, Estudios Centroamericanos. Ellacuria was given Salvadoran citizenship in 1975. In the 1980s, division between Salvadoran Jesuits ignited from the publication of El Salvador, Año Político 1971 to 1972. It harmed the relationship between the university and the ruling party. The internal division divided the university's community into two houses, UCA 1 and UCA 2. Ellacuria molded the center of UCA 2. In 1979, Ellacuria was named rector or president of the university. He held this position until his death in 1989. Throughout the Salvadoran Civil War, Ellacuria had been the strongest advocate for peace negotiations. He acted as an impromptu mediator between the guerrilla fighting force Frente Farabundo Martí para la Liberación Nacional and the Salvadoran government. Ellacuria met with the Salvadoran president Alfredo Cristiani to converse about the hostile living environment the Salvadorans were enduring each day. Ellacuria and his fellow Jesuits were seen by the army as intellectual ringleaders that needed to be eliminated. Ellacuria endured the threat of expulsion by the immigration authorities in 1971 and numerous death threats. But on the morning of November 16, 1989, soldiers of the Salvadoran army came to the residence of Ellacuria and 5 of his colleagues on the university campus. 3 of them were taken outside and shot by the soldiers. The other 3 were shot in their beds. The soldiers also killed Ellacuриa's housekeeper and her 16-year-old daughter. The massacre was blamed on the guerrillas and drew international attention to the crimes of the Salvadoran government. The defining event in Ellacuria's life was him becoming president of UCA. This gave him a substantially greater voice in El Salvador. It allowed him to meet with the president one-on-one and talk about the issues that were affecting the people. The quote I chose was, "Do everything possible so that liberty is victorious over oppression, justice over injustice, love over hate." This quote is pretty self-explanatory. Ellacuria did everything in his power to help and have a voice for the oppressed. He tried his hardest to fight the injustice and hate in El Salvador with justice and love for all. I believe that Ellacuria demonstrated the first foundation by voluntarily serving and loving God. He helped serve God by fighting for the oppressed people of El Salvador. Ellacuria lived the Magus by never backing down. He received numerous death threats and threats of being thrown out of El Salvador, but he didn't let it bother him. He kept fighting for the people. He fought until the end. This is something that I admire about Ellacuria. His legacy of providing a voice for the oppressed will live forever.